And I thought it was quite interesting. I don't have much of an opinion about this sort of erasure of national identity. I think it's interesting and I understand it. But what was interesting to me is this idea of fundamentals and how he simply states door, ceiling, wall, which I find quite interesting because the fundamental for me always is the architecture and that definition of boundary and the aperture of the door are really highly charged political lines of control. And they're things that are quite often forgotten or missed. What we do as architects is so highly charged politically. Everything we do is political, but what we do, we're commissioned to create those boundaries and allow that level of control. So who is on this side of the wall has control, and who is on that side of the wall is quite excluded. And it's something that I think is ignored, or the people, some architects say, well, I'm not really interested in the politics of it, I'm more interested in the Cape Declaration, which is pretty naive, because whatever we do, whether we're consciously involved in the politics of the creation of those boundaries, or whether we ignore it, we really just become puppets of whether it's the culture that we're operating within, or whether it's just the client's bias and values. We adopt those values if we don't somehow think about the implications of what we're doing as authors of that space. And that's sort of the fundamental premise that I operate from, and that's where the Styx Valley protest shelter really came from, because I've always imagined this idea of us building structures that enable power structures to inhabit the city. The only way to really combat that is for the disenfranchised is really through a mobile architecture, through an architecture that can apply guerrilla tactics. And I think about the Occupy movement that we recently had, and the city square here in Melbourne was suddenly taken over by tents, and then Parliament building, these buildings that create this illusion of democratic entrance, big steps overlooking the city, but really the boundaries and the layers of control there are quite violent, really. And that somebody can go and put this quick temporary structure on those stairs, which is really confronting for the powers that be. And of course, as we saw with Occupy, they lead to quite a violent reaction as the police go in there and tear all the tents apart. So the nature of what we do and who we work for, and the fact that we're taught in quite left of centre ways, and then we go out into the trenches of the right wing property speculation. Really, the Styx Valley protest shelter was a reaction to that in many ways. This idea of a guerrilla structure that could go out and in the night quickly we pulled up a tree. And so it's a structure in Tasmania, in the forests, just on the edge of World Heritage Forest, so it's up for grabs for logging. I guess another sort of fundamental foundation that it came from as well is I'm Tasmanian, and my generation grew up with the fight for the Franklin and Gordon rivers after we'd already lost Lake Pedder, and I just saw people protesting and setting up tents and getting angry, and police pulling them out of forests from a really young age. I thought that's what the world was. I didn't know this was the birth of the first Greens party in the world. I just thought, well, that's what you do. You see the problem out there, and you march out there and you set up camp and you fight for what you think is important. I didn't realise that actually that's not right. So after coming sort of from that background as a kid, I think that once I'd set up my own practice, Styx Valley was kind of catharsis for me after moving to Melbourne. And then we thought about the costings of it, and thought, well, realistically it's going to cost $150,000 to get this thing up a tree, which could have been spent much better by the Wilderness Society. We realised that it was actually quite useful fundamentally as a propaganda piece. This is architecture, highly politicised architecture, that is most useful if it's not built. So the Global Research Station, 3 bits of yellow plywood, that was huge in Europe and the United States, where people suddenly drew the international gaze towards Tassie. So I don't know, and I think that's really, that's what I'm kind of proud of with this project, is the fact that we ended up getting to a point where it was obvious, we want to build, architects want to build things, but you get to this point where it's rational not to build, where actually the idea can only be corrupted by the nature of building, by the compromises that entails and brings in. So, and I guess that's what a lot of good paper architecture does. You know, actually going and building it denies it. Its sort of fundamental premise becomes decoration of the standard tectonic and spatial requirements.